Today we're unpacking what has quickly become one of the most explosive geopolitical standoffs of the 21st century, the battle for the world's largest island, Greenland. And look, this isn't just some minor passing diplomatic spat. We are talking about a profound clash that involves national security, immense untapped wealth, and a superpower openly challenging the borders of its own allies.
Right off the bat, this whole situation brings up a totally wild question. Can a modern superpower really just buy a territory 3 times the size of Texas in today's world? I mean, it sounds like something straight out of the 19th century, right? Yet this exact question has recently paralyzed international relations, triggered emergency NATO meetings, and forced us all to ask if the global map is really as permanent as we thought it was.
Now, to understand why any superpower would risk so much political capital, you basically just have to look at the math. The Financial Times actually ran the numbers on this, and they estimated Greenland's potential value at a staggering $1.1 trillion. That number right there establishes the massive economic stakes of our deep dive today. We're talking about a territory holding some of the most critical resources for the entire future of global technology and defense.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the 2025 Greenland Crisis.
Things moved incredibly fast here. The crisis effectively reached a boiling point when U.S. President Donald Trump stated that American ownership of Greenland is an absolute necessity for national security. The administration framed this whole acquisition as vital for protecting North America and ensuring the survival of NATO, even going so far as to threaten severe economic tariffs on Danish goods if Denmark refused to negotiate a transfer of sovereignty.
On the flip side, the opposing perspective was delivered with crystal clarity. Greenland's Premier Mute Borup Egede, alongside Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, firmly and unequivocally rejected the acquisition. They declared that Greenland is simply not for sale. That sparked massive international outrage and led to widespread protests on the streets of Nuuk and Copenhagen, with citizens rallying behind the basic message that borders cannot be bought.
And these tensions rapidly escalated into some very concrete actions. The U.S. threatened steep tariffs on major Danish exports, like pharmaceuticals. Over in the U.S. Congress, we saw the introduction of H.R. 361 to authorize acquisition negotiations. There was even H.R. 1161, a bill that literally proposed renaming the island Red, White, and Blue Land. Meanwhile, Denmark took the pretty extraordinary step of summoning the U.S. ambassador multiple times over allegations of covert American operations attempting to foment secessionism right there on the island.
Moving right along to Section 2, Strategic Defense and Security.
So you might be wondering, why Greenland? Well, in geopolitics, geography is basically destiny. And here, it all comes down to a critical maritime choke point known as the GIUK gap, which sits right between Greenland, Iceland, and the UK. Controlling this naval gateway is the ultimate security blanket. It prevents Russian or Chinese naval forces, especially submarines, from transiting out of the Arctic and threatening the eastern seaboard of North America. So it directly impacts the everyday security of hundreds of millions of people.
Plus, here's the thing. The U.S. doesn't just want to be there, they're actually already there. Under a 1951 defense treaty with Denmark, the U.S. operates the Patufix Space Base up in northern Greenland. This base is essentially the eyes and ears of North America. It houses early missile warning systems, space surveillance networks, and these absolutely vital ground stations for polar orbiting satellites. Losing access to this base, that would be a catastrophic blind spot for U.S. defense.
Okay, let's look at Section 3, the rare earth resource rush.
Because defense is really only half the story here. As the ice melts, a literal trillion-dollar race is heating up for the natural resources buried underneath. Just look at the U.S. Geological Survey estimates. 17.5 billion barrels of offshore crude oil are waiting in Greenlandic waters. And that's not all. Greenland happens to sit on some of the absolute largest deposits of rare earth minerals outside of China. We're talking about the exact minerals strictly necessary for the smartphone you're likely holding right now, for fighter jets, and for renewable energy grids.
Translating all those resources into an actual monetary valuation is honestly kind of wild. Purchase price estimates are all over the map. They range from $40 to $50 billion on the low end, but then scale all the way up to $500 billion from 24/7 Wall Street, and that staggering $1.1 trillion figure from the Financial Times. These vastly different numbers just go to show the sheer, almost incalculable scale of Greenland's untapped wealth.
Which brings us to Section 4, a history of offers.
Now, while this current crisis feels completely unprecedented, the American obsession with acquiring Greenland actually spans more than a century.
Back in 1867, Secretary of State William Seward considered buying it. During World War II, the U.S. outright occupied the island to protect it from Nazi Germany. Fast forward to 1946, and the Truman administration secretly offered Denmark $100 million. And get this, they offered it in solid gold. But Denmark said no back then, just exactly as they have today.
Finally, let's dive into Section 5, the human impact.
Amidst all this massive talk of trillions of dollars in space bases, we really have to remember something crucial. This isn't just an empty piece of real estate on a risk board. It's a homeland. There is a massive contrast between the geopolitical giants fighting over the territory and the roughly 57,000 Greenlanders who actually live there. They inhabit the mere 20% of land that isn't covered by a massive 3-kilometer-thick ice sheet, navigating a rugged environment and a very complex history.
And when you actually ask the people of Greenland what they want, the data is pretty staggering. January 2025 polling shows a massive 85% of the population overwhelmingly opposes leaving the Danish realm to join the United States. Only 6% supported the idea. It is a resounding, clear rejection of foreign annexation from the local population.
But it's worth noting that their situation is incredibly delicate. Greenland currently relies on Denmark for a massive annual subsidy of over $800 million, and Denmark manages their foreign defense. Yet, the Greenlandic government's official long-term goal isn't to be Danish or American. Actually, it's total independence. They are pursuing ultimate self-determination, which places them squarely in the middle of this superpower tug-of-war.
So that brings us to a final, pretty provocative thought. As we look at the unimaginable wealth, the critical defense coordinates, and a superpower willing to test the absolute limits of its alliances, we have to ask ourselves, is the era of territorial acquisition truly in the past? Or are we standing on the precipice of a new age where modern geopolitics might permanently rewrite the map of the world? It is a question with severe global stakes, and the battle for Greenland is far from over.